Thank you, Scott. No, a real pleasure from my side as well. Yeah, so Catalysis works in a slightly funny niche, and so probably very few people would know the kind of work that we do. Myself and my colleagues do a great job. We get to work with growing companies, typically where an investor is already involved or looking to get involved, and we help those teams think about how to join up individual capabilities, team effectiveness, organizational capability, and strategy, and try and make all those things more or less align and make the journey of growth and value growth exciting rather than scary. And that's roughly what we do, and various methods that we do that. But mostly we have senior people on our side working with senior people on the other to try and figure out the often difficult dilemmas and methods, I guess, to improve the batting average on the things which entrepreneurs, chief execs find difficult sometimes. Right. I graduated, and obviously this is going to date me. I graduated in 1990, just as the Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain fell, and I already had to choose between getting a respectable job in London, probably, or going off to what sort of the Wild East. And so I ended up in Romania, as you rightly say. I had visited a couple of times prior to the revolution there, with a student group and doing some research. And there were relatively few Romanians in the West, whereas there are loads of Hungarians and Poles. And Romanian is an easier language to learn than some of the other ones. And so I ended up there trying in a very amateurish way, it must be said, to create various businesses, we had a license for creating hush puppy shoes, and we were trying to export carpets and aluminium out of the Republic of Moldova, and trying to import secondhand clothes, and a real range of slightly mad schemes at the time. Yes, I mean, absolutely. And I think what you had, obviously there was a little bit of culture shock, just the fact that it was, one country and language rather than the UK. So there was a bit of that. But actually the main thing that was the shock was a system that under communism had worked with very different assumptions and the rules. And so, and was going through a rather chaotic transition towards more democratic forms of government and towards market-based forms of economics. And so it was, pretty mad, particularly in the beginning. In terms of learning from that, I think one was that you needed to be extremely nimble, because you could quite easily find a roadblock to a business appearing almost overnight. The big issue that we had in 1990, 91 was just the availability of hard currency. And if you had access to that, you could make lots of money, and if you didn't, you could basically get squished. But as I started then working to help to work with businesses looking to come from the West to Romania, I guess one of the things was that in that environment that was so chaotic and unknown for companies coming from elsewhere, I learned a phrase which is that in the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king. And that was me. I didn't know very much, is the reality, but I knew more than anybody else, and I knew a little bit of Romanian. And so it was possible to make certain things happen just through a bit of enthusiasm, a bit of energy, and helping install relatively simple methods and routines, which could be very value-adding for those companies in Romania and also those coming from the West. So I guess what I draw from that is that in an ill-defined market, you need people who are prepared to do things quick and dirty, making things move around quite quickly. So going from kind of nothing to okay rather than okay to good or good to great. There is that kind of messy early stage where you just got to try stuff and see what happens. And that, in a way, when I came back to the UK subsequently, in this area of looking at management teams with and for investors, there was a bit of that as well, which is nobody quite knows. So you just got to try something and see what happens, and then improve on it and keep improving until it becomes decent. Well, I mean, it could be. I mean, I think, having said that, when I think of the entrepreneurs who we get to work with as Catalysis, it's rare that, I mean, there will be occasions, but lots of the teams, particularly kind of in the tech space, are very ideational. They're able to think out all sorts of things. But there's this interesting sort of transition between sort of chaotic ideas, but no execution, and then on the other end of the spectrum, just doing the same old thing in the same old way. And somewhere in the middle is a magic zone where we're taking a few things which are genuinely new and giving them enough oomph and management bandwidth to make them actually work. And that is space which is quite difficult to identify. And I think one of the things that I learned, also I guess comes from a lesson in Romania, is that particularly for entrepreneurs who are going into markets where there are incumbent players, often interesting things happen at borders. And by borders, I don't just mean geographical. Obviously, that was part of my Romanian experience, but between functions or between different parts of the market, and the opportunity for entrepreneurs who are insurgents very often, going up against big established companies doing roughly the same thing is usually a way of losing money. But if you're connecting things in a new way or going across a geographical border which people haven't gone across before, often that is where small amounts of effort and bandwidth can produce quite big returns. So I'm quite interested in a way the solution to that. I mean, so yes, trying things out, but doing them in places where you're more likely to have the time to experiment and grow before a bigger player comes and attacks. Well, correct. I mean, so a lot of the businesses that we're working with at the moment are looking at an existing activity and then finding a new tech solution to particular pain points. So I'm not going to name them, but one is a business which I worked with a few months ago, where just in terms of how do contracts get created in companies, is a relatively manual and expensive method, and it might be using outside lawyers. What that business does is it's found a way to automate the most common sorts of contracting processes, and then getting them inserted into Outlook, into Word, into Excel, and so on. So I mean, in a way, you kind of think, well, wouldn't that have been done already? And the answer was no, and they spotted that gap. Or I was working very recently with a business over in Amsterdam, who are building a technical solution for verifying and certifying carbon credits for companies, which again, for those who've got big supply chains, is a real pain. It's very manual right now. And again, they found a solution. So in both cases, they've spotted a pain point which people haven't already resolved, and they're applying some technology, which I guess is true for lots of businesses right now. Well, I mean, it's interesting. So I had a call just before you and I began speaking with actually an investor-backed tech business who help small and mid-sized advisory consultancy businesses, a bit like Catalysis, to look at their business model and see what could be automated and apply some AI, machine learning to help make business models more efficient and to improve the quality of delivery to clients. And look, I guess like any advisory business, there's always a risk of being a bit hypocritical of telling clients really well what they should be doing and they're not doing it ourselves. And so, and I'm looking at that potential automation process for our business as something which on the one hand should save money, so it's good for a potentially recessionary period, but also makes us more scalable because I'm still hoping that we can grow through the recession. So it doesn't necessarily have to be either or, that either we kind of bunker down or that we kind of go health level for growth in a way that in the middle of that space there is this evolving business models for for the tomorrow which is approaching us. Look, I'm an economic historian by background, and almost every major technology improvement has been greeted with horror, whether it be the introduction of electricity, which again there were people going around saying it was going to kill us, kill the population. Obviously, electricity can kill people. On the whole, it's been pretty good. The internal combustion engine, which obviously we're now worried about because of the pollution. But the reality is that cars liberated lots of people from drudgery and our streets from horse manure. So big enabling technologies are scary. They do involve lots of change and adaptation, but usually end up reducing lots of sort of mindless grind. None of us enjoy mindless grind. And so AI, I think, is the same as that. It isn't the solution to all of our problems, but it is a tool which I think can allow us to do better work a bit more efficiently. Look, I'm somebody who's really enthused by uh, solutions which are high impact and low cost. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but that's why my little business is called Catalysis, because it's the concept that with relatively small uh, interventions that it's possible to create a lot of value. Um, yeah, the cheapest thing that we can deploy um, is things which will help us avoid uh, doing stupid. But just to give you some examples, there are a number of things which we see entrepreneurs struggling with and suffering from, many of which, without huge investments of time or money, can be made significantly better. So I'll give a classic example, which would be hiring senior people, right? Most growing businesses, that's a big issue. How do you find those people? How do you specify what you need? How do you then onboard the person and get them productive? Those are quite expensive sorts of activities, or building teams or management practices which are going to be better than average. I mean, I'm also a big fan of what's called evidence-based management, which is looking at how companies go about doing things, seeing what seems to work better and what works less well on average, um, and then doing the stuff which works better. So, in the case of bringing in senior hires, to me, the high impact, low cost thing to do is to get much better at specifying requirements. It's relatively cheap to do, and it avoids recruiters running around and bringing in irrelevant candidates, uh, and then people getting quite far down the line with some potential senior hires, and then ending up feeling that they're having to compromise because they never really spend enough time thinking up front what they needed, and end up with people who are kind of good, hard-working people, but just not quite right for the role. And so, the opportunity uh, to be a bit more structured in thinking, what do I actually need for the business up front, rather than coming with a blank sheet of paper, writing down some relatively random things, and then hoping that it'll turn out. Yeah, is a very expensive and quite stressful way of doing things. So I would say that the thing which is the biggest issue that most of our clients, the entrepreneurial businesses face, are things that they half know. So, they all the people we work with are ambitious and hardworking. That's never the issue. They know lots about their market and their offerings, but it's the kind of things which are everybody's second job. So it is people management. It's looking at the organization structure. It's how to run teams. It's how to build meeting cadences. It's how to join up functions. It's these sorts of things which everybody sort of half knows about, but most of us don't do particularly well. Those things are rife with opportunities to do them significantly better without much greater effort. And the beautiful thing about that, of course, is that even in a recession, we don't need to spend money on those things on the whole. You don't necessarily need advisors or consultants like us to make significant improvements. It requires a bit of sitting down, not doing stuff, even if it's only for an hour, just to think through what would be some guidelines or some principles that would improve the batting average for those things. So I'm a big fan of that, because it's not everything, those things don't necessarily depend on technology, although technology can help embed them. That seems to me a very good way to, again, to save money and to improve impact. Well, absolutely. But the biggest issue we have in kind of small cap mid market companies is not. I mean, yes, it can happen that somebody can go in and disrupt the culture or not fit. But I would say the bigger issue is just in terms of capacity and capabilities and skills. Is good people going into the wrong jobs, and then they struggle. The business struggles as a result. There are, of course, there are some idiots and rascals out there, but they're a relatively small number in my experience. It's just good people, if they're going into the wrong roles, and then the business, it takes 6, 9, 12 months to get that role turned around in one form or another. I mean, the other thing, which is kind of not unrelated to that, is the people that we work with have got usually various kind of KPIs, financial KPIs, commercial ones, operational ones. There's lots of things that we do which are important, like building teams, making organizations work better, sharpening strategy. None of those things have clear measures to them. So in that sense, they're a bit invisible. We all talk about them, we kind of do bits of them. But if you don't have the insight into how well those things are working, and that doesn't have to be some sophisticated metric, it could just be for teams who are learning how to build better meetings, asking themselves at the end of each meeting for a minute, what worked well, what didn't work well in this meeting, and what little tweak might we make to make this a little bit better next time. There are lots of little opportunities of that sort to improve particularly the connective tissues, as it were, of businesses, without, again, lots of cost or sophistication. Yes, very much so. Yes, I think taking our own medicine is important. So there are a couple of things, I guess. The first is the environment is changing. It's a cooler economic environment for sure. The last couple of years, we've been very heavily engaged on transaction work because people have wanted to invest money and to sell their businesses. So we've had a lot of work of that sort, and that seems to be cooling down, at least to some extent. And so we are having to shift gears again to doing more work on improving team organization effectiveness. For businesses, some of whom will themselves have to be adjusting their business models and changing their priorities. And so we need to be working with companies on different things. So we need to build some new tools to help clients with some of those things. We need to be remembering things that we haven't done for a while. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, I guess we already touched on, is we are quite a people-intensive business, providing sort of high-level advice to entrepreneurs and investors. but I think our business model needs to evolve too, and so I do expect that we're going to do a certain amount of digital transformation, to automate the things which can be automated. For us, our business is all about person-on-person, high-trust kind of conversations, but there's a bunch of things which I think that we can and should find ways to use better tools on, so that we can deliver high quality at lower cost, in a period where that efficiency is quite important. I think that, so if the first is adjusting to the different kind of requirements, the second is digital transformation, and there's a third, which is that we are also trying to find a way to move from being a kind of a good operating business, just doing projects well, creating impact, to building our own equity value. Till now, we've just been happy doing our projects. But I think one of the things that's always worth thinking about from an entrepreneurial perspective is this something which can be given life beyond the few people who are involved with the business today? How do we leave a legacy? And part of that legacy then has economic value in terms of IP, which is embedded, in terms of processes which are working by themselves, and the business not depending quite so much on me personally. So that's on my mind as well, is how do we build that longer term future for the Catalysis? That's very kind, Scott. Thank you. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and there's a lot of our thoughts and I guess research and so on there, which might be helpful to some of those listening. Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate it.